Mark Rogers TV knocking out as many bowls as we can possibly get to in our next stops on December 26th in El Paso, Texas at the Sun Bowl with Miami taking on Washington State. And I expect this to be an extremely entertaining matchup with two explosive offenses. We bring in Cam Underwood from State of the U to help us break down the Canes. Cam, thanks so much for joining us as always.
Always a pleasure to be here. I'm ready to do this.
Yeah, definitely. So the big news is not the bowl game. It's, of course, you got a new head coach, and he's got quite a track record at Georgia. I guess they were tired of winning 76% of their games, 10 or 11 wins per season, most seasons. They're in Athens. Your initial reaction, and now that you've had a couple weeks to sit on it, your thoughts about Mark Richt?
Yeah, we do have Mark Richt as our head coach now. Obviously, fired Al Golden in the middle of the year after the catastrophic loss to Clemson, the worst loss in the 90-year history of the Miami Hurricanes football program. But that's in the past, and Mark Richt is our president of the future, and I couldn't be happier as a Canes fan and somebody who follows, the University of Miami, averaging, more than 9 wins a season in the SEC, regardless of division, is a accomplishment. Years, I think he only had 2 years. Obviously, most of those years is being very successful. SEC East championships. Won a couple SEC championships. Could have been to a couple of national championship games. Obviously, the year that the Fiesta Bowl with Miami and the school in the state south of Michigan, Georgia went 13-1 that year. And they would have slotted in easily, but you had 2 undefeated teams in front of them. Obviously, a few years ago, when Aaron Murray in the SEC championship game at the end against Alabama, they tried to go straight for that play instead of clocking it or doing anything else. That ball gets intercepted, and then the ball game's over, and that was a 2-loss season. But one of them, I think, no, that might have been a 1-loss season. But, that was a very successful year.
So basically, I just don't want to correct you here, Cam, but I got to jump in on this one. So the 2012 SEC championship game actually wasn't an interception. Actually, Alabama didn't stop Georgia. They ran out of time, so they threw the ball out in the flat, and the kid's knee hit the turf. And otherwise, if that's an incomplete pass, they still have like 5 or 6 seconds left to throw another play or two. They just needed like 4 more yards or 4 more seconds, one of the two, and they didn't get either. So, that team most likely would have demolished Notre Dame in the national championship game. So, Mark Richt, I think above anything else, it's a very solid hire in regards to character, integrity, and those sorts of things, as well as his football acumen. So, help us out in regards to any injuries that we need to clean up, any house cleaning before we start to break down this matchup.
Yeah, before we get in, practice reports from this week when the team has gotten back to practice. A couple of players seem like they're dinged up a little bit, but I don't think it should be anything, any new season-ending injuries or anything like that. So you have Danny Isadora, who was an offensive lineman. He was in a non-contact red jersey the last couple of days. You've had Sonny Adogwu, another offensive lineman who actually scored a touchdown this year, but he was not present at practice today. And then Jamal Carter with a hamstring. He's a safety who plays, pretty heavy rotation snaps. He was in a yellow non-contact jersey. So, just a couple nicks and dings, but, you're coming up on the 13th game of the year. So, pretty much everybody has some kind of a thing, but those guys were the ones who, for whatever reason, were held out or limited in their participation in practice today.
Cam, I'm having trouble assessing this season. 6-7 last year was certainly a disappointment. 8-4 right now, and especially considering what most people expected after the Clemson debacle and Al Golden being shown the door and looking at the rest of the schedule, that wasn't daunting or overwhelming, but most of those teams appeared to be in much better shape at that point of the season than Miami. The team really pulled together and finished well down the stretch.
Yeah, so it's a weird season. Honestly, 8-4, chance to win 9 games. And if you look at it, I mean, obviously it could break either way, but if you look at things, if you bring a good effort at Cincinnati, you're looking at 9 wins. We were right there against Florida State all the way to the very end. It's close to being a very, a 10-win, 11 potential win season. But then also, you go back to the Duke game, which could have went the other way. You look back at the Nebraska game, which we tried to give away. whatever, we won the Duke game. But, you know, but I'm just saying, even as I sit here and say, okay, a couple of these games could have been, a couple losses could have been wins, a couple of these wins could have been losses. We could have been sitting here at 6-6 again very easily. So, yeah, it's been a weird kind of a year. I think that the main thing that I'm going to take away from this season is the resiliency of this group and the talent and job that Larry Scott did as the interim head coach, just focusing the group, getting everybody right back together, going 4-1 down the stretch, losing to North Carolina, but beating every other team that we've played since he was the interim coach. You know, and that's crazy to me. You know, it took something this monumental to shake up, you know, a legendary loss, a historic loss, a firing of a coach, players being injured, you know, everything going haywire, to find the center of the team, to everybody coalesce together. And then, you know, we were joking about it, but after the Duke game, we said, okay, Larry Scott has more wins against top 25 teams after one game as an interim head coach than Al Golden had in 4.5 years. And, you know, it's like, yeah, it's a joke, but it's the truth, because we didn't ever beat anybody good. So, you know, you look at the end of the year, it's 4-1, you know, as juxtaposed with the beginning of the year. And there's still times when Miami is hot and cold, and you don't really know what the system wants to be, what the scheme, what the identity is. But, you know, for the resolve of the players and player progression, Afamba Kamalu, who had the against Georgia Tech, got the fumble and had the stiff arm of death to the quarterback and everything. That guy, he stepped his game up to levels unseen throughout this season. There's been guys, I mean, Stacey Coley, who was doing nothing at the beginning of the year, all of a sudden, he's looking like the freshman All-American that he was 2 years ago. You know, he put 100 yards and a touchdown on Florida State. He did the same thing against Pittsburgh. He's a dynamic playmaker all of a sudden. These guys who were, you know, middling in their performance, they stepped up. And that, for me, is what I'm going to focus on moving forward. Obviously, there were the poor performances, the Florida Atlantic game where the first half was a 20-20 tie against FAU. There's no reason that should have happened. Nebraska game, we should have beaten Nebraska the way that Clemson beat us. You know, we're up 35 or 27-3 or something like that. Why is that an overtime game? You know, and so there were negatives also, but you know, I'm going to focus on those positives. So it's a very uneven year depending on what you want to look at. And as they say in the NFL, you are who your record says you are, and we're 8-4 and going to a Tier 1 ACC bowl game. So, you know, it's not all bad, and I think it's actually pretty good with our roster. And then Coach Mark Richt coming in.
No, I completely agree that the kids definitely pulled this thing together, because we do our little ACC breakdown show that you're a part of many times. And I know that before the Clemson game, assuming that was a loss, which it turned out to be, and then even after that loss, everybody across the board, everybody just assumed this thing's coming off the rails. This team's going to collapse. How are they going to give any effort? It's done. It's going to be 4-8. It's going to be 5-7, something like that. So credit those guys for pulling that thing together and coming up with an 8-4 chance at 9 wins. Right. So besides winning the game, what would you like to see in this bowl game? Because we're looking at a Miami program, unless I'm missing something, you've lost 4 or 5 consecutive bowl games.
Yeah. It's been a while since we've ended the year with a win. Definitely, obviously, you know, you want to have the proper result of a win, but you want to see those guys, the seniors, you want to have them play well. The Afamba Kamalus and Calvin Hurlus, both of those who are playing in one of those, you know, the Shrine game or the NFLPA game or something like that, the postseason senior all-star games. You know, you want those guys to play well. You want them to, you know, go out with the win. You know, obviously, you want your playmakers to make plays. So your Brad Kaayas, your Joe Yearby's, your Stacey Coley's, your David Njoku's, your Deion Bush's, your Corn Elders. You want, you know, your players to make plays, and you want to see progression from the team. And you just I want to see passion. And I know that there's been some blowback from going to the Sun Bowl. You know, and a lot of people were thinking about maybe going to the bowl game when we looked like we might have gone to the Pinstripe Bowl in New York, but we're going to El Paso, Texas, which is way far west, right on the Mexico border, and it's a very tough place to get to. So you're not going to have a lot of fans going there. But regardless of that, you want to see the team play strong. You want to see them come out and play with passion, play with pride, you know, physicality and speed. And those are the things that I'm really looking for. just being successful. You got to obviously try to get some scheming going to slow down Washington State's passing game because, Mike Leach, their mad pirate scientist out there, he wants to throw the ball 60 or 70 times a game. And some of those throws are basically extensions of the run game. You have swing passes and quick slants and everything. And he's going to play at a tempo, so you have to combat that. So, I want to see that they're playing strong, they're playing fast. But in the end, really it comes down to winning the game by hook or by crook, by any way necessary, any means necessary. And that's what I'm really looking for.
Cam, we always talk motivation during these bowl games. I heard a number of ESPN analysts say that Miami doesn't want to be in El Paso, Texas for this game. At the same time, I really don't understand motivation when we talk about these bowl games because this is the one time of year that this is the stage for college football. So if you're a college football fan and you want to watch college football until we get to New Year's Day or the day after, you have to watch, in particular, this Miami-Washington State game. So this is going to be the largest TV audience that Miami's going to have all year. So I would think that if they think of it that way, that they would want to play in this game.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it's probably going to be the second largest from the Florida State game because that game still moves the needle nationally, and I think that we did good ratings there. But, yeah, it's a 2 o'clock kickoff the day after Christmas, my cousin's birthday, actually. So national broadcast on CBS, TV. So even if you don't have cable, people are going to be able to tune in. So that's going to help and things. But, yeah, like I was saying, I think it's more from the fan base standpoint of it's the day after Christmas and it's in a place that's tough to get to. It's not Atlanta, it's not Dallas, it's not New York, it's in El Paso. So I think from the fan standpoint, for some of us, that was where the negative thought came from. I don't think it's necessarily from the players. I think the players want to be there. I think the players are happy to have a bowl game. It's a tier 1 bowl game. Like I said, it's national television. It's a good showcase for them. I think the players are the players are dialed in a different way than the fans are.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we just have to come in.
This Washington State team, Cam, is no joke. When you think Washington State making postseason play, they did a couple of years ago under Mike Leach. They were 6-6. They beat all the bad teams. They got wiped out by all the good teams. But this team beat Arizona. They beat UCLA at the Rose Bowl. They beat Oregon in overtime. They would have beaten Stanford had they gotten a last-second field goal that was lined up after driving the ball like 55 or 60 yards down the field. So they have beaten good teams and come very close to beating a Stanford team that most people consider a top 5 to 10 team.
Yeah, so Mike Leach obviously having been there for a while and been able to implement his program, seeing the bearing positive fruits of his labor there. So just like you said, they beat some very good teams. They've also been competitive against other top-notch teams. That Stanford team, yeah, they had, a couple losses, but, that's a darn good team right there. And they played them to a 2-point game, 1-point game, whatever it was. So, Washington State definitely has talent on both sides of the ball. I know that Mike Leach is an offensive coach, and you focus on the offense, but the defense, you have to get stops to win games and create turnovers and things like that. So they've definitely been successful on that side of the ball as well. It's going to be a formidable challenge for Miami in this bowl game.
Yeah, Washington State playing a little bit better defense than most people give them credit for as well. So Washington State winning 5 or 6 games is going to throw it all over the field and score points, but they added the defense this year and a little bit of a running game to kind of balance things off on offense. So they got this kid, Luke Falk, and just to show you how important he is, he missed the Washington game, last game of the season. They lose 45-10. So they play as well as they did against the teams I just mentioned. Then they don't have him. They lose by 5 touchdowns to Washington. They got a couple receivers in Gabe Marks with 100 catches and 14 touchdowns. Dom Williams with 73 and 11 touchdowns. They're big kids. They frame up defensive backs and high point the football. So how's the secondary going to hold up in this one?
It's going to be a challenge. Falk, he's thrown for 4,000 yards, give or take, this year. His backup is a kid named Peyton Bender, who's actually from Broward County, from South Florida, went to the Cardinal Gibbons. He was the one, Bender, that is, who started the game that Falk had to miss with concussion syndrome or something of that nature. Falk should be healthy and is expected to play in the bowl game, so you should get their number 1 offense. Those receivers that you mentioned, the first one, Marks with 100 catches. I believe he's been targeted, i.e. thrown the ball his way like 140 times this year. The other kid with 73 catches has been targeted like 95 or 100 times. So you're talking 200 230, 240 passes going to 2 guys. And that's how much they throw the ball there. The defensive backfield is, fortunately for us, one of the strengths of our team. Artie Burns leading the ACC with 5 or 6 interceptions. Corn Elder, he of the miraculous return against Duke, is another very good cornerback. Tracy Howard, who was a 5-star recruit and has had an okay career, but not necessarily a 5-star recruit, top 25 player in the recruiting class career. He's another good defensive back. Deion Bush, he's there. You have Rayshawn Jenkins. You have Jamal Carter, the kid who I mentioned had the hamstring tweak or whatever. They put him in the yellow jersey. So you have a bunch of guys, and I just named you like 6 guys. Sheldrick Redwine, is a freshman also, and he's played some snaps in base defense. So those are 7 guys who are in the defensive backfield, and those guys are going to have to play very well, obviously, because they're going to be put in space. They're going to have one-on-one matchups against these receivers to, obviously have their route combination recognition, and then obviously, just playing good coverage and then recognizing on the ball. And if they catch the ball, when the Washington State receivers catch the ball, making tackles. But it's not just them. Obviously, the linebackers are going to have to get into coverage as well. Jermaine Grace, number 5, who's our leading tackler. He's a kid who specializes in space. He's one of the best cover linebackers in America, so he will definitely have to work in that intermediate area in coverage also. So it's not just the defensive backs, but it's a good thing for Miami that even with the numbers that we've given up passing, that is one of the stronger areas of our team, and they're going to be put to the test.
One last thing, Cam, before I let you go, on the offensive side of the football, now that you've had a chance to watch and assess 12 football games, offensive line, is that going to be the major issue possibly in this game? And is that the one big improvement that this program needs to make? That's my, from a long distance perspective, thought on the next step that this program needs to take to protect the franchise quarterback and get the ball to playmakers.
Yeah, definitely the offensive line is the thing that we have all been looking at all year long. I've spoken on the ACC Breakdown show, and when we've done, these kind of little interstitial things before, Brad Kaaya has made throws literally with somebody on his collar, and he's stepping up to make the throw all year long. And that's from the FAU game, which was game number 2. And if you look at a lot of the games, last game against Pittsburgh, he was running for his life a little bit, and we didn't know that he was that mobile to get away from the rush that came straight up the middle, but he showed a little bit more athleticism and pocket awareness and mobility than we had seen, and that's because the offensive line quite simply is not very good. Joe Yearby is going to have a 1,000-yard season, or he's 71 yards away from a 1,000-yard season, which is remarkable considering the state of the offensive line. But we have, I think, 5 or 6 4-star kids and 2 5-star recruited, ranking kids on the offensive line. So the talent is there, but the play on the field has not been. So this game, next year, moving forward, that's a major thing. And then also, have to mention defensive line also. That production has gotten a little bit better, but it still has a ways to go. So on both sides of the trenches, but especially on the offensive line for this game, with the Washington State team who wreaks havoc. They get up the field, they play a one-gap system, and they can neutralize running games, and our running game is average at best. The offensive line needs to pack a lunch and bring their A game, or otherwise it's going to be a long day.
And sometimes that unexpected athleticism is actually disguised behind self-preservation, and maybe that's the case with Brad Kaaya during this season. So we got 8-4 Miami, 8-4 Washington State. And for it not being a Premier Bowl, I expect this one to be fun to watch. So, Cam, appreciate the breakdown, man.
No problem, Mark. Thanks for having me.